Welcome to Fear and Fiction, where the stories are strange and the fear is real. I grew up around funerals that did not look like funerals anywhere else. If you are from New Orleans, you know what I mean. People cry, people hurt, but sooner or later somebody picks up a horn, somebody starts moving, and the whole thing changes. That was how my grandfather wanted to go. He had been sick for a while, so none of us were surprised when it happened. Sad, yeah, but surprised, no. He had already told everybody not to sit around acting like the world ended just because his did. So after the service, we had a proper procession. Band out front, family close behind, everybody else falling in wherever they could. It had rained earlier, one of those quick New Orleans rains that leaves the whole street shining like somebody polished it. The air was still thick, pavement wet, cars creeping past slow because people were spilling into the street. I remember looking around thinking my grandfather would have loved it. Then I noticed this old man. He was maybe 20 or 30 feet behind us. Dark suit, black hat, real old school clothes, like something you would see in one of those family pictures where everybody is dressed up just to stand on the porch. Nothing strange about an old man at a funeral, except I did not know him. My grandfather knew everybody, and when somebody like him dies, there are people who show up that you never met before. Old co-workers, guys from the neighborhood, people from church, somebody he helped 30 years ago. So I did not think much about it, not at first. We kept moving, music picked up a little, people started dancing. I looked back again. Now he was closer, maybe 15 feet, still walking by himself. No handkerchief, no umbrella, no dancing, just looking straight ahead. I remember thinking he looked too serious for the second line. Then I caught my aunt looking at him too. She was walking beside me, and the second she realized I had noticed him, her whole face changed. Not scared exactly, more like irritated, like I had seen something I was not supposed to pay attention to. She grabbed my wrist, told me not to look back again. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She squeezed harder, said it again, "Do not look at him." That took the smile right off my face. I asked who he was. She ignored me, just kept walking. Now, I'm trying not to look, which of course means that is the only thing I want to do. I lasted maybe 30 seconds, looked back. He was right behind the family now, close enough that I could see his face. Older black man, thin, deep lines around his mouth. And he was not looking at me. He was looking at the hearse. That made me feel a little better for maybe half a second. Then he smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to show he knew exactly where he was. My aunt pulled me forward so hard I almost stepped on the person in front of me. The rest of the procession I kept my eyes forward. I could hear the band, people laughing, shoes hitting pavement, everything normal. But the whole time I had this feeling somebody was walking directly behind me. When we got to the cemetery, I finally turned around. He was gone. I asked around after everything settled down. Nobody knew what I was talking about. My mother said she did not see him. My cousins did not see him. My uncle did not see him. Only my aunt, and she refused to talk about it. That bothered me more than if she had told me some crazy ghost story. She would not even let me finish the question, just said some people come to pay their respects, and you leave it at that. I kept pushing. Finally, later that night, after most people had gone home, she told me a little bit. Not everything, just enough. She said there had been another funeral in our family when she was a kid, long before I was born. Same thing happened, same man, same clothes, same way of walking behind everybody without really joining in. She said her mother saw him first. Then somebody else in the family saw him again years later, always at a funeral, never anywhere else. Nobody knew his name, nobody knew how he was connected to us, and nobody ever spoke to him. That was the part she kept repeating. "You do not speak to him." I asked why. She said because nobody knew whether he was coming to say goodbye or coming to see who was next. That sat with me, still does. I have been to plenty of funerals since then. I do not spend them looking over my shoulder. I'm not trying to turn grief into some ghost hunt, but I will tell you this. Every time the band starts playing and the family begins moving down the street, I check the people behind us once, just once. And if I see a dark suit and an old black hat, I keep my eyes forward, because my aunt was right about one thing. Some people come to pay their respects, and maybe it is better not to ask who invited them. I used to think funeral homes only felt creepy when you were there by yourself. Turns out they can feel just as strange with 50 people standing around you. This happened in Memphis a few years ago when somebody close to my family passed. I was in my early 30s at the time, old enough that funerals were not new to me anymore, but still young enough that I hated going to them. The visitation was the night before the service. It was at one of those older funeral homes in the city, not some huge fancy place, just an old brick building that looked like it had probably been serving families around there forever. Inside smelled exactly how you would expect: flowers, carpet cleaner, coffee. That faint smell funeral homes have that I cannot really describe. But if you have ever been inside one, you know it. There was a little table near the entrance with programs, cards, and the visitation book. Everybody signed when they came in: name, maybe an address, sometimes a little message. I signed mine and went inside. The viewing room was packed. Family everywhere. People from church. People I had not seen since I was a kid. Everybody hugging and talking about how long it had been. Nothing unusual. I stayed maybe 2 hours. Toward the end of the night, most people had cleared out. It was basically immediate family and a few close friends left. I was helping gather flowers and cards when my aunt called me over. She was standing by the visitation book. She asked if I knew somebody. I looked at the name she was pointing at, did not recognize it. I told her no. She asked my mother, same answer, then somebody else. Nobody knew the person. That is not weird by itself. People come to funerals that the younger family members might not know, so we figured it was probably somebody from work or somebody from way back. Then my aunt said something that made us all stop. She had been sitting near the entrance almost the entire evening. She remembered most of the people who signed. She did not remember this person. Again, not impossible. She could have missed somebody, but there was something else. The name was written on the last line of the page, under mine. I had signed close to the end of the night. I knew nobody was standing behind me when I did. I actually remembered that because the pen was not working at first, and I had to scribble on the corner of the page to get the ink flowing. The mystery name was underneath mine. I joked that somebody must have slipped in while we were talking. Nobody laughed. My aunt kept staring at the handwriting. Then she asked me to bring the book over to my grandmother. The second my grandmother saw the name, she closed the book, just shut it, did not say anything. That changed the whole mood. I asked what was wrong. She told me nothing. I asked if she knew the person. She said we needed to leave it alone. That answer was not going to work for me. I kept asking. Finally, she told me that the name belonged to somebody who used to live near our family when she was young. I asked if they had been friends. She said not exactly. Then she told me the person had been dead for years. Now everybody got quiet. I thought maybe somebody was playing some kind of sick joke. That honestly made more sense to me than anything supernatural. Maybe one of my cousins knew the story and wrote the name to mess with people. I started asking around. Nobody admitted to it. My grandmother got irritated and told everybody to stop talking about it. Before we left, I took a picture of the page. I do not even know why. I guess I wanted proof. The funeral was the next morning. We got there early. The same visitation book was sitting near the entrance. I opened it. The name was gone. Not crossed out, not erased. Gone. My signature was still there. The message above mine was still there, but the line underneath mine was blank. I called my aunt over. She looked at it and immediately went to find one of the employees. The employee said nobody had removed anything from the book. I showed him the picture on my phone. He looked confused. Then he took the book into the office. About 10 minutes later, he came back with another employee. They asked if we had written the name ourselves. We said no. They checked the book again. Nothing. At that point, I started thinking maybe the page had been switched, but every other signature was exactly where it had been the night before. Same page, same bent corner, Even the little scribble I made getting the pen to work was still there. Just not that name. My grandmother would not discuss it until after the burial. We were at the house later that afternoon when she finally told me the rest. The person whose name appeared in the book had been a man from the neighborhood when she was a teenager. He was known for showing up whenever somebody died. Did not matter whether he knew the family well, he would come to the visitation, sign the book, stand somewhere in the back, then leave. People used to joke that he attended more funerals than church services. But according to my grandmother, there was another part people did not joke about. Toward the end of his life, some older folks started saying his name would occasionally appear in funeral books, even when nobody remembered seeing him there. I asked when he died. She gave me a year. It had been more than 20 years before our funeral. I still did not believe the supernatural part. I figured somebody in the family knew the story. Maybe they thought it would be funny. Maybe my grandmother herself had written it and did not want to admit it. That explanation worked for me for about 6 months. Then another relative died, different funeral home, different side of Memphis. I did not go to the visitation that time. I only went to the service. When I walked inside, my aunt was standing near the entrance. She looked at me, then looked down at the table. I already knew. I walked over, opened the visitation book. There was the same name, same handwriting. This time it was halfway down the page. I took my phone out immediately. My aunt told me not to. I asked why. She said my grandmother had already seen it. Apparently she walked in, checked the book, saw the name, and went straight into the chapel without saying a word. I took the picture anyway. That name stayed in the book through the entire service. I checked before we left, still there. Nobody ever figured out who wrote it. And I never saw anybody at either funeral who looked out of place. That is what bothers me. If I had seen some strange old man standing in the corner, at least I would have something to attach it to. A face, a person, something. Instead, all I have is a name. I have been to several funerals since then. I do the same thing every time. Before I walk into the viewing room, I check the visitation book. I tell myself I am just curious. But that is not really why. I am looking for that handwriting. Because if I ever see that name again, I want to know one thing. Did he come because somebody already died? Or does his name show up before somebody else is about to? I don't really tell this story because every time I do, somebody tries to explain it away. Maybe the florist made a mistake. Maybe somebody was playing a joke. Maybe grief had everybody confused. I've heard all of that, and honestly, I would probably say the same thing if it didn't happen to my family. This was in Birmingham. I was 26 at the time, and one of my older relatives had passed after being sick for a while. It wasn't unexpected. That doesn't make it easier, but at least we had time to prepare. The funeral was on a Saturday. The night before, we had the visitation. It was at a small funeral home on the west side of the city. Nothing fancy. Brick building, small parking lot, a couple of viewing rooms, the kind of place where half the staff seems to know somebody in your family. By the time I got there, flowers were everywhere. Standing sprays, lilies, roses, those big arrangements from churches where the ribbon has the church name across it. People had sent so many that some were sitting in the hallway. I was helping move a few arrangements when one of the employees brought another one through the front door. It was big. White flowers mostly. A few red roses mixed in. There was a card attached. The employee asked where we wanted it. My mother told him to put it near the front. I grabbed the card because we were keeping track of who sent what, so we could send thank you cards later. I opened it. It said something simple. Thinking of you during this difficult time. Then underneath that was a name. I recognized it. Not because I knew the person, because I had heard the name my whole life. It belonged to my grandmother's older brother. He died before I was born, way before. I thought maybe somebody in the family had the same name. So I handed the card to my mother. She looked at it, then looked at me. I asked if that was who I thought it was. She told me to take it to my grandmother. My grandmother was sitting near the front of the viewing room. I gave her the card. She read it, and her hands started shaking, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. She asked where the flowers came from. I pointed toward the arrangement. She stood up and walked over to it. She touched one of the red roses. Then she asked who delivered them. Nobody knew. One of the employees said a delivery driver had dropped them off a few minutes earlier. My grandmother asked what florist. The employee checked. There was no tag. That was strange, but not impossible. Maybe it had fallen off. My grandmother told us not to worry about it, but she kept the card, put it straight into her purse. Later that night, after the visitation ended, I asked her why she reacted like that. She told me her brother used to send their mother flowers whenever somebody in the family died. Always white flowers with red roses mixed in. I told her that was probably why somebody chose that arrangement. Maybe they knew the story. She shook her head, said almost nobody alive knew that. I still wasn't convinced. Families have stories. People remember things. Some cousin could have heard about it years ago. There had to be an explanation. The next morning, we came back for the funeral. The flowers were still there. My grandmother walked straight to that arrangement. She stared at it for a few seconds. Then she asked me if I noticed anything. I didn't. She pointed to the red roses. There were 6 of them. She said there had been 7 the night before. I told her maybe one fell out. We checked around the floor, nothing. Maybe an employee moved it. Nobody remembered touching it. Again, weird, but still not enough for me to think anything supernatural was happening. After the service, some of the flowers were taken to the cemetery. Others went back to the house. That particular arrangement came home with us. We put it in the living room near the front window. The house stayed packed most of the afternoon. People eating, talking. Biertrunte. I worked nights at a funeral home in Durham for a little over a year. I wasn't an embalmer. I wasn't doing anything like that. Mostly I cleaned, moved things around, helped set up viewing rooms, brought flowers inside, made sure chairs were where they were supposed to be, and handled whatever little jobs needed to get done before families came in. I needed the money. That was it. People always ask if working around dead bodies scared me. Honestly, no. Not after the first couple weeks. The dead were never the problem. It was that building at night. During the day, you had phones ring, families coming in, employees talking, doors opening and closing. At night, everything changed. You could hear the air conditioning kick on from the other side of the building. You could hear pipes moving inside the walls. Sometimes, the ice machine would drop a load of ice and scare the hell out of you. After a while, you learned what every sound was. That's why I know what happened wasn't just me being nervous. It started with a photograph. We had 2 services scheduled close together. One family had brought in a framed photograph of their relative, older black man, probably taken when he was much younger. He was standing beside an old car wearing a light-colored shirt. It wasn't the main portrait they were using near the casket. This was a smaller picture, maybe 5 by 7. The family wanted it sitting on a table with some other photographs. I remember it because I liked the car. I set everything up that afternoon. Later that evening, another employee asked me to help prepare the viewing room next door. That service was for a woman, completely different family, no connection between them. Around 10 that night, everybody else left. I stayed behind because we had another delivery coming early the next morning, and I wanted to finish cleaning. I walked through the first viewing room. Everything looked fine. Then I went next door. That photograph of the man with the car was sitting on a table beside the woman's casket. I knew immediately it was in the wrong room. I figured somebody had moved it by accident. I picked it up and carried it back, set it exactly where I remembered putting it. Problem solved. Maybe 45 minutes later, I came back through. The picture was gone. I checked the table. Nothing. I walked into the other room. There it was again. Same table, same spot beside the woman's casket. Now I was irritated. I thought one of the employees had come back into the building and was messing with me. I checked the office. Nobody. Parking lot was empty except for my car. I checked the front door. Locked. Side entrance. Locked. I carried the photograph back again. This time I put it flat on the table instead of standing it up. Then I took a picture with my phone. I wanted to know for sure where I left it. I went back to cleaning. About 20 minutes passed. I heard something fall, not loud. More like a little wooden knock. It came from the hallway near the viewing rooms. I walked over. The photograph was lying face down in the hallway, halfway between the two rooms. That got my attention. There was no way it fell from the table and traveled that far. I picked it up. Glass wasn't broken. Frame wasn't damaged. I looked at the picture again. The man standing beside the car. Same little smile. Nothing strange about it. I carried it back into his viewing room. This time I put it inside a cabinet underneath the table. Closed the cabinet door. I know I shouldn't have done that because the family had arranged everything a certain way. But I was tired of dealing with it. I went into the office and finished some paperwork. Maybe an hour later, I had to walk through the hallway again. I stopped before I even reached the second viewing room. The photograph was sitting outside the door, on the floor, standing upright against the wall. I just stared at it. That's when I got that feeling. You know when something happens and your brain immediately starts trying to build an explanation? Maybe I forgot where I put it. Maybe somebody else was inside. Maybe I was tired. But I remembered opening that cabinet. I remembered putting the picture inside. I remembered closing it. I wasn't that tired. I called one of the older employees. He had worked there forever. I told him what was happening. He laughed at first. Then he asked me which photograph. I described it. He got quiet, asked which room it kept showing up near. I told him, the room with the woman. There was a pause. Then he told me to leave the photograph where it was. I asked why. He just said leave it alone until morning. That wasn't good enough for me. I asked if something like this had happened before. He told me he would explain tomorrow. Then he said something I still remember. He said, don't put it back in that cabinet. I didn't. I left the photograph sitting against the wall. Then I went into the office and stayed there. I wasn't walking around anymore unless I absolutely had to. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something. 3 knocks, slow, knock, knock, knock. They came from the hallway. I didn't move. A few seconds passed, then 3 more. I told myself it was the building. Pipes, air conditioning, anything. Then my phone rang. I almost jumped out of the chair. It was the funeral home's internal phone. One of the extensions was calling the office. The display showed the extension number. It was the phone in the viewing room with the woman. I didn't answer. It rang maybe 6 times, stopped, then started again, same extension. I sat there looking at it. Finally, I picked up, didn't say anything. At first, all I heard was static, then something that sounded like movement, like somebody rubbing fabric against the receiver. I hung up. I called the older employee again. This time he told me to leave. I asked if I should lock everything up. He said the building was already locked, just leave. So I did. The next morning I came back around 7. Several employees were already there. I walked straight toward the viewing rooms. The photograph wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was back on the table in the man's room, exactly where I had originally placed it. I asked who moved it. Nobody admitted to touching it. Then the older employee pulled me aside. He asked if I knew anything about the 2 families. I didn't. He told me the woman in the second room and the man in the photograph had grown up in the same part of Durham. That didn't mean much to me. Plenty of people from the same generation knew each other. Then he told me the woman's daughter had been looking through some old photographs the previous afternoon. She saw the man's picture while walking past the other viewing room. She apparently stopped and asked why they had a photograph of him. One of the employees told her it belonged to the family next door. The daughter said she knew him, or at least knew who he was. When her mother was young, the 2 of them had been close, very close, but their families didn't approve. This was decades ago. Eventually they went separate ways. Both got married, both had families. Nobody talked about it anymore. I asked if the man had died too. The employee looked at me funny. He said no, that photograph wasn't for a dead man. The man in the picture was still alive. His wife was the person in the casket. I had misunderstood the setup the entire night. The family had brought photographs showing different parts of her life. The picture of the man beside the car wasn't her husband. It was her brother. He was supposed to be arriving from out of town that morning. Now, I was really confused. I asked what any of that had to do with the woman next door. The older employee told me to wait. Around an hour later, the man from the photograph arrived. He was old now, walked with a cane, but I recognized him immediately, same face. He came in with his family. Before he went into his sister's viewing room, he He stopped in the hallway. He looked toward the other room. The woman's family had started arriving too. He stood there for a long time. Then an older woman from that family came out. She saw him. Neither one said anything at first. Then she walked over and hugged him. I was close enough to hear her ask if he knew. He said no. Apparently nobody had told him that the woman had died. He had come to Durham for his sister's funeral and found out that the woman he had loved when he was young was lying in the room next door. Their services were scheduled at the same funeral home, same morning, by accident. At least that's what everybody said. Before his sister's service started, he asked his family for that photograph, the one that had been moving all night. He carried it into the other viewing room. He sat beside that woman's casket for maybe 10 minutes. Nobody bothered him. When he came out, he handed the picture back to me. He asked where I found it. I didn't know what to say. I told him it had been in the hallway. He stared at me for a second. Then he smiled. Not happy. More like he understood something I didn't. He said, "She always was stubborn." Then he walked away. I quit working nights a few months later. Not because of that. At least that's what I tell people, but I never forgot it. I've tried to explain it logically. Maybe somebody was moving the photograph. Maybe another employee had a key and came inside without me knowing. Maybe the phone malfunctioned. Maybe the knocks were pipes. Every individual part has an explanation. It's when you put all of it together that I get stuck, because that photograph kept leaving one room and moving toward another. And the whole night, I thought it was attached to the dead. It wasn't. It belonged to somebody who was still alive. Somebody who had no idea the woman he once loved was lying 20 feet away. Maybe it was all coincidence. Working in a funeral home taught me there are plenty of those. But ever since that night, I don't laugh when people put photographs inside viewing rooms. Pictures carry more than faces. Sometimes they carry whole parts of people's lives nobody else knows about. And every once in a while, I wonder if that woman wasn't trying to haunt anybody at all. Maybe she just wanted to say goodbye. Thank you for taking the time to watch the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, hype the video. Get in those comments and tell me which story was your favorite, and if you have any story suggestions. Until the next time.